Do you enjoy reading at bedtime? But do you sometimes find that it gets quite exciting and that instead of your children relaxing and going off to sleep easily, they are quite agitated, quite excited, and they want to keep going? So I've got a few tips for how to make bedtime reading a little bit more relaxing and conducive to a good night's sleep. Hi there, welcome back to another story time. So I'm Lydia and I've been dying to make this video. These are some tips to help make bedtime a little bit more relaxing and help everybody wind down in the evening. So the first thing I would recommend is to avoid pop-up books or activity books or books where you have to touch things or open flaps. Anything where the child is getting involved and moving and touching and pulling out and getting too excited. These books normally have not too much of a story and it's more about the interaction, and we want sort of the opposite. We want the child to be listening calmly and not getting too involved and excited. Normally these books are great for when you're on the carpet all together and everyone's pulling and grabbing and wanting to have their turn to touch it. Instead at bedtime we just want it to be a little bit more relaxed and the body to kind of be relaxing as well as the mind. I think another thing to avoid is actually books with quite a lot of dialogue. So when you have lots of different people speaking, maybe you're doing different voices, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming for the child. They're having to follow who's speaking, how many different characters, what's happening in the story, what's happening in the dialogue. So when you have a story that's told from one person's point of view, or it's just a narrator explaining what's happening, those can be a little bit more easy for the child to digest and a calmer read. So something that's actually very good are chapter books. So if your child is already reading books that are a little bit longer, or you're reading them books that are broken up into chapters, these are great because they give you the perfect opportunity to stop. My children are very good at asking for multiple stories. So we've introduced like one story per child, and when we know we get to the end of the chapter, that's the time to stop. So we don't keep going and keep going and keep going. And it gets them excited for the next night when they're going to find out what's happening. So one more thing that I would avoid is choosing books or stories that have a difficult theme. Maybe something that's kind of emotionally challenging, such as death, illness, loss, or grief. Try and keep these books for a time of day where you have a little bit more of an opportunity to discuss this. You don't want to leave your child going to bed with heavy thoughts or worries or unresolved issues. So I would choose books that have slightly a lighter theme, maybe a bit of humour, or talk about something more practical, or introduce a topic that they're familiar with. So we definitely want to use these kind of books in the right time and place so we're able to address these issues appropriately. Of course, I should say that there are lots of books out there and everyone has their own type of book that they love, and of course you should choose to read whatever you enjoy. These are just my opinions and some tips I think will help create the right relaxing atmosphere for bedtimes. One of my top tips, and one of the things I absolutely love at bedtime, is poetry books. These are probably highly underrated, but they are fantastic. So firstly, they have less images and therefore the child is not sort of following the page as much. They're able to relax their eyes, they're able to use their imagination and just kind of go off into their own world. The melody, the rhythm, the musicality of the poems are really good for creating kind of a serene ambience. For when you're following a rhythm, you're normally much more relaxed than when you're trying to concentrate on a story arc or what's happening next. So they're really good at relaxing the child, setting a good mood, and kind of triggering the child's natural imagination so they're able to start almost daydreaming. We want them to sort of daydream and drift off to sleep almost. So I love poems for this. Another thing that I would recommend is if a child has a favourite story, don't be afraid to read it again and again. So for you, it might be boring. And if that's the case, I would encourage you to, ad-lib a little bit, add a little bit of detail, or you can even try and change the story a bit if the child is okay with that. And sometimes even just read a book and don't bother reading it. I just discuss what I see in the pictures. We talk about the illustrations, talk about the characters. But reading a familiar story multiple times is great because the child's relaxed, the child knows what to expect. They're not getting too excited and they're just able to enjoy and sort of almost switch off because they know what's happening. And it can be a really good conclusion to the day for them to come back to something familiar and comforting. So my last tip is not so much in the choice of the book, but also in the way you read it. And I think it's really important to try and moderate your voice and your tone and your pitch as you read. So obviously, there are some people that get really excited and really into doing all the voices and the sounds and the action. But be aware that as you're coming towards the end of the book, as you're coming towards the end of the reading session, to try and bring down your volume, slow down the pace at which you're reading, and try and keep the atmosphere relaxed and calm. Obviously, you still want to make the story entertaining, but you want to be sensitive to that the way you deliver the story can affect the energy and the energy of your child. So as you get towards the end, just slow it down a little bit, bring your voice down a little bit in volume, and hopefully when you end the story, your child will be nice and relaxed and ready to fall asleep. If you have any ideas for books that you love at bedtime, please share them in the comments below. I know there are so many books out there, there's not enough bedtimes to go through all the books we could read. But yeah, any tips and suggestions that you use at bedtime, would be great to share them with other people. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time for another story time. Take care and goodbye.